What's really an interesting option is solarization. So I'm just going to present a brief overview on solarization, what it is and how you can use it. So the basic idea, and I believe we did it in the B-loan that we're going to be working with today, is you put a black plastic sheet out for the duration of the growing season. The area underneath that sheet collects a ton and ton of heat, and all of the flowers or all of the grasses, all of the plant material underneath that sheet will collect heat to the point where all of it dies. And at the end of that growing season, you remove the plastic, you take off all of the dead vegetation, and you seed whatever plantings you want to be present in the form of a dormant seeding, and they will establish in the next growing season. What can differ is the amount of time it takes in relation to how much direct sunlight your area is getting. So if you're getting direct sunlight like the area where we'll be working with today, you might only have to leave the plastic on for a month or two.
You mow it short, you rake it, expose that soil, and then you spread the seed. Here comes the seed. And then compost and sand make good bulking agents. You have to keep it moist, and then cut back on watering and fertilizing, because that will outcompete that existing turf. And just a note on this, in my organic lawn care business, we overseed every client's lawn with no-mow fescue. And then they can, and human nature being what it is, they just don't water as much as they should if they have Kentucky bluegrass. So they're all set up for that
transition.
Yeah. So, and then never again mow below 3 inches, and you'll be good. And adding compost, this in the picture is about right. 1/4 of an inch is all you need. If you want to have more, you sure can. And sometimes we'll put down more if it's really uneven. We'll fill in some low spots. This is an actual, I had one of our, Cassie Brown, our operations supervisor, stopped by here the other day, got a sample from the garden that we're going to be working on, and she did a bioassay on it. And this is that microscopic slide. And this guy right here, that's a fungal hyphae. And it's got good width. And these little black dots around and those little white bubble things, those are bacteria. So, and then some of these, like this one here, that kind of white crystalline thing, that's a grain of sand. This little rock particle. And these big black ones, those are pieces of organic matter. And the yellow in there is fulvic acid, which is really important. And the black is humic acid. So, and I don't see much else going on there, but we got videos. The only place she could find the fungi was in the root zones of the dead plants. But it's too bad, because this little blur here was I can't remember what she said, if it was a flagellate or ciliate or something else I can't pronounce, but he's just bumbling around there, and that's what they do, and they'll get it around a piece of organic matter like this, and you'll just see them swarming around that, and they're just feeding on bacteria on that surface. So it's just fascinating, and it's really fun to watch them when they're live, and you can see nematodes that come through, and it's like a zoo. I mean, you just sit there and stare at that zoo. And I guess now we go out and play outside.
Take up the plastic right away? Is that what?
Yeah, so the first step that we're going to want to start with is the removal of the solarization blanket or solarization plastic here, followed by the removal of the vegetation.
Or stand in front of the camera and give instructions?
Okay, so here, the great volunteer crew that we have is removing the solarization blanks that were covering this little garden area. So what these solarization blanks do is they go onto a patch of vegetation, a patch of ground cover for an extended period of time, and while they're over the top of vegetation, that vegetation collects heat to the point where all of the grasses, flowers, etc. are killed, and you're able to establish new plantings in the area. Solarization, the solarization plastic solarization blanket was left on for a full year, but you really only need it on for the extent of the growing season. So I would put one down if I were going to use them whenever that last snow melt ends, and leave it on in an area like this, maybe a few months, so through like July or August. But the safest bet is always to leave it on for the duration of the entire growing season, and then plant whatever new vegetation you want as a dormant seeding in the fall. So the first step that you see going on here after the removal of the solarization blanket, the solarization cover, is now we're trying to remove the dead woody material, or excuse me, the dead vegetation from last summer's solarization. So that's what these people with the shovels are doing. They're targeting those little blue stem and other patches of vegetation that are present, taking out the vegetation and also turning over the soil. And what you want to do here is you want to expose as much bare soil as possible, because when we drop that bee lawn seed down, we want it to hit as much we want it to hit that bare soil so that it can germinate. So after we're done removing that dead plant material, like here, we're going to expose the bare soil, plant the bee seed into it, and I believe we have some fertilizer. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And do we have germination blankets as well, or did we forego that? So we're going to put down some of that bee lawn seed, which is a mixture of turf grass and bee lawn flowers. Those bee lawn flowers being creeping thyme, self-heal, and Dutch white clover. And what that fertilizer does is it's a starter fertilizer, meaning that it has a little bit of phosphorus as well. So even though in Minnesota there are some laws regulating when you're allowed to use phosphorus, one of the exceptions are for doing new plantings. And that's because phosphorus is used to help roots establish in the soil. So anytime that you're trying to establish a new lawn planting, whether it be a bee lawn, whether it be a perennial lawn cover, the use of phosphorus will be allowed, will be permitted, because phosphorus is applicable, phosphorus is useful during that new establishment phase. So now we're going to start raking up the dead plant material. We're going to lay down the seed and then and mix it with that fertilizer. So what we're doing now is we're power raking to remove the dead plant material and expose the ground for the soil.
And then
Yeah, this is good. Do you have
You want this stuff in the wheel.
What in the heck are you doing with all those flowers? Watch. I'm gonna go after Eddie. Very dressed.
So steps are solarized throughout the duration of the growing season. Here it was left on through the winter as well. After that, you remove the solarization blanket and you remove the dead woody material, dead vegetation. So now we dug up the dead vegetation, we raked it into piles, and now we're removing it via wheelbarrow. So what we're trying to do here, and you can see it really nicely over in this corner, is expose as much bare soil as possible. Because in order for your seed to germinate, it needs to hit that bare soil.
stuff that I'm dealing with. But Gene said we didn't need to do it.
Because what happens is,
Okay.
At the end of the, he would have recommended we would have taken it off in the fall and planted.
Oh, okay.
What about?
First week of November is when I do it. It's really based on soil temperature. So you want it to be cold enough to the point where your seeds won't germinate.
We put some compost down
You just want to leave it there for
add organic matter and some
Yeah, because that
beneficial microorganisms
that
to the
black
soil.
covering, that plastic
That's the flywheel that drives
so it's leveraged in there with
the soil
They
biology.
use them for other planting purposes, so that it really helps to collect heat.
Almost every day. So, yeah.
Is there any metrics you can use to tell
So that's where I would refer to the Xerxes fact sheet.
It's like that since nobody asked us to do it.
Where's your place?
Okay, let's not have to worry about it, Blaine.
Oh, yeah,
You wanted to call some of your garden people.
Weird how things stick with you.
Okay, so what we've done so far is we first removed that solarization blank, and we followed that by removing all of the dead vegetation. That was done with a combination of shoveling and some really hard weeding by a lot of the volunteers here. And after that, we laid down some compost and raked it into the soil bed. What we're doing here is we're trying to make a nice, even, flat surface with lots of bare soil present to our flower seed that we're about to drop in. So here's another volunteer who is carrying a lot of that dead vegetation over to the dumpster. And now we're able to do the fun part, where we drop that flower seed onto our newly laid down compost with a little bit of that starter fertilizer.
So we'll probably have to keep weeds out of it, won't we, if some blow in and come up?
So that is possible, especially given the time of year.
Yeah.
So weed flowering generally begins once those 50-degree days start to accumulate.
Right.
And we were already about 80, which is when those early perennials start to come in.
Yeah.
So I mentioned spring violet, common violet. That's already been blooming for about a week. I'm sure you've seen some dandelion, but
Some dandelion will come in, these trees will start dropping seeds, and they'll come up in
Yep.
June or July.
But the solarization and the work we've done here to get that bare soil ready, and now we're dropping that seed in. Hopefully we do get some
Hopefully don't
vegetation
see
going
too
soon.
Yeah.
Yep, and the turf grass will provide some good instant cover as well, with the flowers coming up in between the grasses.
And we should.
So now the seeding process is going to begin, and it's going to be a mix of probably, I would guess, around 98% turf grass seed and 2% flower seed. And that might sound a little odd, but what actually covers this surface will be very different. So the flowers are going to be a little bit more aggressive than the turf grass, so we'll actually end up with a nice matrix of both flowering species, the heel, the clover, the thyme, and turf seed.
So you're going to put the flowers in that you recommended in the presentation?
It was ultimately up to Becky what she wanted to
Okay.
put in here.
Maybe
So,
something
if you want instant
that's
results, only the self-heal and clover tend to bloom in that first year after seeding.
Okay.
But if you don't mind waiting a little bit longer, I'm talking, 2 to 3 years even,
really?
then the creeping time will start to bloom. So the vegetation will be present earlier, but it might take 2 or 3 years until it blooms.
Before you say anything.
Yeah, especially since it prefers a sandy soil.
So don't pull anything out unless it's obviously a dandelion or a...
And you could even leave dandelion. That's all personal preference, and you might get a little brushback from across the street.
Trees.
Yeah,
Get
yeah.
the trees out.
Yeah, or like a crown vetch, a creeping Charlie, any kind of invasive weed that might run a risk of taking over the lawn.
Okay.
So what it's doing is it has a certain radius that it shoots out at. So you're gonna walk and you're gonna unwind that little bell, forecast. Yeah, so I haven't used one like this. The ones that I use are normally like with wheels and on the ground. But so here, if you put your hand out, you'll probably be able to feel it, right? So you just want to
So you want to get the penetrometer in?
Sure, tell us what that is.
This is a penetrometer. It measures soil compaction. So when the needle hits the red on the gauge, that indicates enough compaction where a plant root can no longer penetrate. So what you do, you just
so that you have
push
a
down
seeding rate and just forecast it as even
until you hit that that red line. And that length right there is our root zone, as this soil is right now. So, and many times it's only this deep, and then microbial action will make it go deeper. But this soil is actually in pretty good shape. I think there's a compacted layer of gravel or asphalt or something underneath this whole bed.
So what Becky's doing now is she's dropping a starter fertilizer over the entirety of the surface here. And what you want to try to do when you're putting down the starter fertilizer or the grass seed or the flower seed is you want to walk at a somewhat constant rate, that way the starter fertilizer gets spread evenly throughout the yard. You want to make sure that you're getting equal amounts of that fertilizer throughout the entire surface. So what differentiates a starter fertilizer from a different kind of fertilizer is the presence of phosphorus. And what phosphorus does is it helps to promote healthy root growth. So after Bob is done spreading the starter fertilizer here, then Becky could move on to doing the same, forecasting that flower and grass seed. Okay, yep, I know. This is, yeah. I'm familiar with this seed mix. This is pretty darn good stuff. So, where's this from?
Twin City Seed.
Let me see what the percentages are. Okay, so it's a little bit high in flower seed. We're at 9% flower. So, and 6% of that is Dutch white clover. So there is that potential that this could turn into a little bit heavier on the flower side, a little bit lighter on the grass side. Normally I go around, maybe around half the clover that's in here. But what you do have in here is really, really high quality grass seed. So most of the mixes that I've seen here, they'll incorporate some perennial ryegrass in addition to the fescue. Here you have 4 different types of fescue, all with 90% germination rates, which is quite high. So you have some high quality grass going in with those flowers.
Okay, so I do have another eco blend of just fescues. Would you mix a little bit of that?
It might not be a
fescue?
bad idea to mix a little fescue in with this. So do you know how much was just dumped in there in terms of maybe percent of the bag, or because this is a 5-pound bag and we only want to use a little bit less than half of it.
If he does another one like he has, it'd be about half, I think.
Okay.
Michael?
Yep.